Grief comes in many forms, and whether as children, teens, or adults, we all need different outlets to help deal with loss. Hospice Niagara focuses on helping people and families live well from diagnosis to bereavement in hospice, at home, and through programs that include things like group talk, music, journaling, and walks. But I must say that my interest was really piqued when I heard about the hospice wind phones, which provide a way for people to talk to loved ones they are grieving. I have Joy Friesen, a psychotherapist and manager of community programs at Hospice Niagara, on the show today to talk about the wind phones. Hi, Joy. How are you today?
I'm great. Thank you so much. How about you, Janice?
I'm wonderful. Thanks for coming on to talk about Hospice Niagara and a couple of the really interesting programs that you have for, you don't just provide hospice healthcare, it's actually so much more than that. One of the things that you now have 4 wind phones in Niagara. First one in Balls Falls, I believe, and now you've just opened one in Welland, which is the 4th. Can you go through the concept of the wind phone? I know it started in Japan, so if you can just talk about the origin of the wind phone and the role it can play in helping people with grief.
Absolutely. Well, the first wind phone started in Japan, as what you have just mentioned. A Japanese man named Itaru Sasaki was grieving his cousin. So he misses and longs for those conversations that he used to have. So he decided to install an unconnected phone in his garden. And every day he would go in his garden and talk to his cousin. That was in 2010. A year after, in 2011, a tragedy hits Japan. A tsunami claims almost 20,000 people and almost 2,000 people that are missing, which are considered dead by now. So in an instant, there were around 20,000 grieving families, just like that. So, as we all know, the hardest part of grief is the unsaid goodbyes, the unsaid words. So, next thing he knew, hundreds or I think thousands of people were lining up in his house. Everyone wants to use the phone. They all wants to say their final goodbyes. And then he eventually donated the phone to the city. And then now it's all over the world. And now in Niagara, in Welland, in St. Catharines, Fun Hill. Now it's just how would I say, a very powerful tool for grieving individuals to have an outlet.
Yeah, the first one, so it's quite different from a group, which we're going to talk about in a bit, but it's quite different than having what some people might consider a more public conversation starting out anyway. It can be very hard to talk about grief in the beginning.
Mm-hmm.
How did hospice decide, or how did you hear about the wind phone? And then the first one was installed in Balls Falls. So you're
Yes.
combining a walk in nature with
Yeah,
the phone.
absolutely. So it all in Hospice Niagara, the idea and inspiration is that we acknowledge that grief is very individual, very unique, and not everyone resonates with mainstream, support or traditional way of receiving grieving support, such as counseling, grief support, grief walk, hike, and stuff like that, right? And then we're like, how about when we think about it, there's a lot of psychological benefits of journaling those things, because I myself is a psychotherapist, so I support grieving individuals and how to do it through CBT, journaling, blah blah blah. And so when I reflect more on that, it's similar to the wind phone. With journaling, you're writing, you're releasing those suppressed emotions, hence the cathartic feeling. And I believe, this is my own personal opinion. I believe the wind phone is more powerful, because the thing is that you're not just writing, you're activating all your senses. You're listening. You listen to the silent. You're talking to your loved one. There's a huge difference between talking about it, because talking about it is just like a discussion about the deceased or the person that you're grieving, while talking to that person gives you that feeling of connection, right? So now the brain is a very powerful machine, right? So as I said a while ago, the hardest part are the unsaid goodbyes. And so when you use the wind phone, your brain would then remember, hey, wait a minute. With the wind phone, you're activating all your senses, right? So when you're talking, when you're listening, and when we think about it, the hardest part are the final goodbyes. You were able to say that. So when you talk to the phone, you will then remember, wait a minute, I was able to say my final goodbyes because I talked to the wind phone, right? So now it's being released, those suppressed emotions. You feel the connection.
I think it's interesting. So I have two life experiences. One was I had the ability to be with my dad for about 4 months once he was diagnosed with cancer up until he died. And I lost my mother in an accident, which was instant. The interesting thing I was going to say with my dad, even though I had the chance to be with him, which is often what will happen with hospice care,
Mm-hmm.
we didn't talk about him dying. You just didn't. You don't want to have that conversation. He didn't want to have that conversation until it was um, getting to the point where he said, okay, I've not made final arrangements. And it was an incredibly difficult conversation. But then we didn't talk about it again. So you don't actually often, even while the person is in end life stages, have that grief conversation. So, yes, I think it was easier for me because I did get to spend the 4 months with my dad and sort of come to terms with it, but I didn't have that conversation. So I can see, even in that case for me, um, I would be able to go to the wind phone and tell him how mad I am about some of the things he did, right? I was having this conversation. My dad died in 2005. And in thinking about this interview, I was having that conversation with my partner and I was yelling about some of the stuff my dad did. And I thought, wow, where'd that come from after, 20 years?
Well, that's very interesting, Janice, because when we think about some of the theories of grief is that the latest theory in grief is the continuing bonds. So what does that mean is that when I think of my grandmother, my first big loss in my life, when I think about that, even after death, who she is in my life never changed. She is still my grandmother. And so my bond with her still exists even after death. The only thing I could say is that we learn to love them in a different way. When my grandmother was still alive, how do I show my love? I always eat whatever she cooks. Even I'm so full and I just had my dinner, when she cooked something, I would eat it. That's how I showed my love. But now that she is no longer here physically, how I do still show my love to her is that I live the values she instilled in my life. So the bond is still there, which is what you're trying to tell me, that, you know what, even physically, my dad's no longer here. I can still have those unfinished conversation. It's very interesting because yesterday I was just at a presentation and about grief and loss on older adults. And one of the participants there have shared that she lost her husband 45 years now and she's still having a hard time processing it. So I talk about the wind phone. And so I said, if the wind phone is here now in front of you, what would you say? And you know what she said? She was like, why did you just left me 45 years ago? I'm so tired. I will talk to him as if he's just in front of me. It's like, absolutely. That's basically the one of the most effective way on how to express those suppressed emotions. And the thing too is that in nature, you can just say anything you want. You do not need to think about and worry about people judging you, right? When you're talking about your friends and stuff like that, that don't even understand what grief is, they'll say, oh my gosh, Joy, you lost your grandmother 20 years ago. You should be okay now. But with the wind phone, I never have to worry about those worries. You can just express everything you want to say, and you can continue that bond just like what Itaru Sasaki had did. It's not just the final goodbyes, but to continue those conversations. I myself visits those wind phones that we have. I update my grandmother what's happening in my life.
That was going to be my next thought, was that it's not like you go to the wind phone once, you get one opportunity and then you never go back. It can be an ongoing, you take up, we all know that walking in nature is very healthy and healing, and that kind of mindfulness. So
Mhm,
I can imagine walking through Balls Falls to the wind phone at a time when Balls Falls might not be very busy,
mhm,
and being able to have that conversation. And then, of course, a lot of us reach an age where we've lost more than one person who's very close. And so you might have to go and have different conversations, because I'm not going to talk to my mom and my dad at the same time. They weren't together. And so I'm not, I've got different conversations and relationships with my mother, as a daughter, or my grandmother as well, who I didn't even think of till you mentioned that, who I was very close to. And talking like that into a wind phone is a lot different than journaling. First of all, a lot of people aren't comfortable with journaling. It's not something they do. But as well, most of us, when we write, we think about what we're saying, and
yeah.
we want to make sure, is it grammatically correct? Have I used the right words? Does this really describe what I want to say? Oh, I'm busy. I'm going to put this aside now because the phone rang.
Mhm.
And it's very cathartic for a lot of people, absolutely. But the idea that you can just go and speak and into a phone, I would think that it might feel a bit strange at first, that you're standing
Yeah.
talking on a phone and there's nobody on the other end, physically on
Yes.
the other end.
Yes, I would share my experience. The first time I use it actually is that I first saw the first wind phone for me was in BC. That was like 4 years ago, 3 to 4 years ago. I was in BC and I stumbled upon it and I use it. And I remember when I used it, I was like staring at it and what would I do? Right? But intuitively I dialed my grandmother's number. As if, because it's a rotary phone. I dialed it and then I waited, and for some reason I could hear a ringing tone. I could hear that tone. And so I talk. And it's the most powerful experience I'd ever had. Our first wind phone at Balls Falls, the first caller that when I say caller, someone that called Hospice Niagara to just provide their experience about the wind phone. This is like a cold call, right? Randomly, we receive a cold call. And he introduced himself. He said he's a surgeon and he lost his son. And he said he had done everything with his grief. And nothing as powerful as the wind phone has done to his grief. To the point that he wanted to donate, what did he say? I want to donate parking passes to everyone that would go to Balls Falls because he said, I find it's very powerful.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
Yeah. Now, some of your other programs at hospice, since the last time, and I talked to Carol Nagy at the beginning of COVID,
Mhm.
and about the difference in not being able to grieve in person.
Mhm.
You have some really, really interesting, both virtual but in-person programs that you have for adults and for children, and one of them is music.
Yeah.
And music, and the way music activates the brain, is also different from talking. So can you just talk to me a little bit about the music program and the grief benefits from it?
I think sometimes it's like when there's no words to express what we feel. Sometimes you just feel that something there, and I don't know what to say about it. That's when music would come into place. At Hospice Niagara, we have different music programs. One is, again, the children and youth. We can do it one-on-one. We can do it also as a family. So if a family lost a loved one, the whole family can do it together. Some music therapy. Then they would create, you do not need to be musically inclined to the music therapy. I think some people sometimes like, oh, I don't want to do music therapy. I don't know this. I don't know. The thing is that you're there and the music would allow you to express whatever you have in mind.
So you're creating your own music. It's not that
Absolutely.
you're there listening to your favorite
No,
album or
through,
playlist.
yes, through the guidance of the music therapist, you will be able to create your own music that is basically for your own journey, your own experience, that it's just unique for you. Uh, we also have Cafe Connection. Cafe Connection is what would happen is that there is a bereavement specialist that would initiate those conversations on grief, and on the background is the music therapist. The music therapist would play music that would then lead how the conversation would go. So, for instance, if through the conversation, the therapist would hear now that there's like a heated, feelings, or the conversations becoming heated, or there's like some kind of, the emotion is too high, the music therapist will play a music that would calm everybody. And at first, when I was listening to that, how she would this, like, oh, I don't know, would this happen, right? So I myself sat in there, and I became like, I didn't say that I'm a manager, blah blah blah. Right? I sat there to be part of the conversation, and yes, the music. There's something about how she plays the music leads where the conversation would go. If she wants to ramp up the conversation, she wouldn't play some music, and then suddenly you're intuitively going with the beat of the music.
It's like having your favorite song from when you were a teenager, for example. When you hear it, it evokes all of those emotions. You start to have memories. You think about friends that you haven't seen for a really long time. You think about those happy times, but then you can also have songs that bring back memories of people who are gone,
Mhm.
and who have died, and it can bring back a sense of sadness, but it's not sadness really when I think about it. You feel sad, but in a way you also feel in a more connected personal space with them. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I felt like it's love that's coming. When we
Uh,
think about it, the the price of the love that we give is grief. So I felt like the way I look at those emotions, because I don't have a name for those feelings that comes, like it's sad, but it's not actually sad, right? Then I just call it love. I'm feeling the love right now, and the love that I give right now is because I'm feeling those grief that I have, right?
okay, I think that makes sense. That's a lot to process,
It's
but yeah, it makes sense. I think that that's why it's not a really sad feeling. It's you
it's
remember
warm.
them. Yeah, yeah, yeah. And it's funny how sometimes there's a song that and I'll have this on a playlist. There's a song that reminds me of someone, and it seems to come up again and again and again. I think, how is that in every single playlist I have? But it's like it inserts itself in a playlist, and you often hear it when you need to.
Mhm.
Is another thing which uh now hospice is growing or has grown. So what
Yes,
started as your original hospice on Ontario Street in St. Catharines, you now have a Fort Erie, and I believe just opening or have just opened Welland.
yes.
And the two new ones, and I think you renovated as well Ontario Street. But I saw the plans when Fort Erie was first developing, and it's just a really also new, cool approach of what you offer at hospice. So it's not like somebody can come in and visit for the day and then they have to go home, and
Mhm.
there's no ability for them to be there long term with the person.
Yeah, so you know what? When I think of my own losses in my family, I lost my father like 6 years ago from cancer. And I wish I know what hospice really is. If I could turn back time, I wish I brought him to hospice because hospice care is about living the last days as quality as possible. It's like home away from home. You will have your own room, you will have there will be a family room. There's always soup, not just for your family that is sick, but for the family, for the visiting families. You have a place to have conversations. I'm so scared before of what death is. I don't even want to talk about death before I came to hospice. But there's this experience that changed my perspective of the dying process. One afternoon, as I was leaving the building, I saw, because at Hospice Niagara, at this Stabler Center in St. Catharines, at the reception area, there's like a see-through glass that you could see the back, right? The back is like a garden. And then I saw a person that is actively dying. The bed is in there. Families are all around the bed. And from afar, you could see birds. And you could see the trees, and you could see the beam lights coming from the sun. And I look at it, it's like, this is like a movie. And I was like, why did I not feel sad? Why do I feel at peace looking at this? And I said, you know what? When I die, I want to have that experience. Because the thing is that, what's the point of fighting something that's coming? Why not just enjoy those last moments? Just be on the sideline. You can never have the same experience that I saw if you're not at hospice.
Joy, thanks for coming on today and talking to me. There are so many more things that Hospice Niagara offers, and I encourage everybody to go to hospiceniagara.ca and look and see, because we didn't get a chance to talk about the at-home care that you offer, and that is a conversation for another day. But thanks for coming on, especially talking about the wind phone, which is so unique, and I feel calmer even from having a conversation. And I will go to Balls Falls, because as I said, I had a little bit of an argument with my dad the other day, and it occurred to me that the wind phone might be the place to go. So
Thank you
thank
so
you very
much.
much.
Thank you so much, Janice.
You can hear past episodes of Life Unscripted on your favorite podcast app and on my website at lifeunscripted.ca.